Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In my day job, I work as a psychologist, therapist, whatever you want to call it. But after hours, I work hard to make weekly videos. So god damn it, you better like, subscribe, and share. Also, please make sure to check out the previous video in the Cure for Mental Illness series. That way, you'll be better able to understand this one. To do so, just click here. Okay, in this video, we will see how Anna Freud, the daughter and heir of Sigmund Freud, builds upon the discoveries of her father by elaborating on the structural model. The structural model is just a fancy way of saying how the id, ego, and superego work together. As the video progresses, you might get confused about whether you are listening to Freud's or Anna Freud's theories. This is because after Freud's demise, Anna Freud protected and defended her father's work. Anna never challenged her father's orthodoxy, and she only took Freud's theories into directions Freud would agree with. Regardless of the reasons for her docility, she was a great thinker in her own right. This is evidenced by her pioneering child analysis. Her second big contribution is putting the ego and superego on the map as equally important psychological structures as the id. In this video, we will just do that and get into why the ego is just as important for the therapeutic process as the id. So let's get right into it. According to the structural model we discussed in earlier videos, the id would love to become conscious. Now let's think about this. Why would the id love to become conscious? It's simple, really. The id has the most chance for gratifying its passions if it can find a way to slip through the defenses of the ego and reach consciousness. Out of awareness, tucked away in the dark, the id does not just stop working. It merely waits and demands. Growing each day, it does not get satisfied. It waits patiently for opportunities to discharge its accumulating passions. Let's say the ego does not find socially acceptable ways to satisfy the accumulating passions of the id. In that case, mental illness will occur. This happens because psychic energy generated by the id that ideally wants to be used as energy to get things done in the real world gets internally redirected and causes havoc in the mind and body. So as a logical consequence, the id sees the therapist as an ally in its quest to break free and find satisfaction out in the open. The therapist, according to Freud, should help the patient release modified id drives into the open so they can be experienced and gratified. Although gratified only in a modified form, since Freud is very pessimistic about human nature. He viewed these drives in their pure form to be too antisocial, sexual, and aggressive, as mentioned in earlier videos. As you can see, Freud was very concerned with bringing id impulses out in the open. He was interested in bringing to consciousness the deepest parts of the unconscious that, for whatever reason, never found a way to be experienced and gratified. And now that we know that the unconscious id considers the therapist as an ally and savior, but what about the superego and ego that, unlike the id, are both conscious and unconscious at the same time? The ego's relationship with the therapist is of love and hate, since the ego itself is split into an unconscious and conscious part. The conscious part of the ego wants to go into therapy, work on him or herself, and wants to be an ally to the therapist so they can both work together to improve the person's overall health. That is the conscious part of the ego that we label as I or the self, the part of us that is the most readily available to us. It's the part of us that we consider I or me in daily life. For example, I am feeling hungry. I am feeling sad. I feel good after finding shoes for my impossible large feet. I hurt my toe. I feel thirsty. I love my girlfriend. I feel like going for a jog. I feel proud. I work as a therapist. I have a best friend named Rose. But what about the unconscious part of the ego? The unconscious part of the ego is where the defense mechanisms lie in hiding, secretively maintaining the erected defenses against the passions of the id, transforming the antisocial passions of the id into socially acceptable wishes so they can be indirectly satisfied in the external world. The quality and the type of the defenses deployed by the unconscious ego depend on three factors. Factor 1, the availability of fulfillment in the external world. If the outside world is relatively accommodating to the needs of the person, the unconscious ego will have no reason to deploy harsh, rigid defenses against the passions of the id, hereby making good mental health much more likely. Factor 2, the superego. A sadistic superego will also force the ego to deploy more rigid defenses. A sadistic superego will try to deny the individual very healthy, ordinary human emotions, thoughts, and behaviors by labeling them as intrinsically wrong. The third factor is the intensity of the id drives. The intensity of the id drives differs in people. Some people have stronger id drives than others. In some people, even if the external world is relatively accommodating, some individuals may still struggle to develop flexible, adaptive defense mechanisms as their stronger than average id drives will be more demanding than the external world will tolerate. If the unconscious ego feels like it cannot get away with even the most basic needs and desires, it will develop extremely harsh and rigid defense mechanisms. Or better yet, it will totally suppress needs and wants so they can never be satisfied, not even indirectly. So Freud's focus was mostly making these id drives conscious so that they can find gratification one way or another. But according to Anna Freud, simply bringing id impulses into consciousness is like the Cold War rescue of a few handful of East Berliners, which fails to address the continuing existence of the wall and the remaining security system. Freeing some East Berliners has little impact on the fate of the majority who still remain behind the border. Anna Freud found it important that the guards themselves must be won over, the defenses dismantled. As we can see, it's only natural for the unconscious part of the ego to consider the therapist as an enemy. It has to, because the defenses that it employs work better if they remain unconscious. If they become conscious, they can be altered and influenced, and in the eyes of the unconscious ego, made less effective. And that isn't a risk it is willing to take. It doesn't realize that it can learn through working with the therapist to deploy more adaptive defense mechanisms. It sees the therapist as trying to destroy the gates of the prison to release the dragons that have been locked away for years. It is afraid of what lays in the dark and wants to arm itself against it by erecting barricades and deploying soldiers to keep the dragons in cages, only letting them out under guided surveillance when they are in cuffs, when it's time for the dragons to momentarily fly around and eat. But giving the dragons full freedom is madness for the unconscious ego. And here comes a therapist saying like, hey, it's okay. Let's see if we can somehow give the dragons more freedom. And here and there, even set them free. This is something very dangerous for the unconscious ego. In Anna Freud's own words, it is the task of the analyst to bring into consciousness that which is unconscious, no matter to which psychic institution it belongs. He directs his attention equally and objectively to the unconscious elements in all three institutions when he sets about the work of enlightenment. He takes a stand at a point equidistant from the id, the ego, and superego. This means that the therapist should take the id, the ego, and superego equally serious and work to make all three equally conscious. Freud was very aware of the defense of the ego, but he did not, as Anna Freud did, give equal importance to the id, ego, and superego. At the end of the day, Freud wanted to reach the id and make it conscious, and everything else was kinda a means to an end. After Anna Freud, therapists have started to realize the importance of maintaining an equal balance of the id, ego, and superego, and dove deeper into the latter two areas. Anna Freud and those after her studied all parts of the ego, as well as its non-pathological everyday workings. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.